Swedish with Joanna, a podcast for beginners. Hello everyone and welcome back. I hope you're doing well today. Hej allihopa och välkomna tillbaka. Jag hoppas att ni mår bra idag. In this episode we're doing something a bit special. We're comparing Old Swedish and modern Swedish. What changed? What disappeared? And what stayed the same? Let's explore it together. So before we begin, make sure you have a snack, something nice to drink, and get cozy, and let's get started with the episode. Let's begin the episode by asking, what is Old Swedish? Old Swedish was spoken roughly between the 13th and 1600 centuries. It had a very formal tone, long sentences, and vocabulary that sounds poetic to us today. And that leads us to the question, what is modern Swedish? Modern Swedish is more direct, shorter, and uses simpler structures. Pronunciation has also changed. Vowels are lighter, and the rhythm is faster. Now, let's talk about vocabulary that has changed over the history. Let's look at some words that existed in Old Swedish but sounds unusual today. I'll read the Old Swedish version, then the modern version, and then explain the meaning for you. So our first example is the phrase Ty jag haver ej förgätit eder. Ty jag haver ej förgätit eder. And one more time. Ty jag haver ej förgätit eder. That was the Old Swedish. Now I will read modern Swedish. För jag har inte glömt er. För jag har inte glömt er. And one last time. För jag har inte glömt er. Both sentences mean because I have not forgotten you. Old Swedish used the word ty, as you heard me reading earlier. It means for or because. Also the word haver means have in English. And also the word förgätit means forgotten. Let's look at another example. And the Old Swedish, and the phrase is Hur står det till med eder idag? Hur står det till med eder idag? And one last time. Hur står det till med eder idag? And modern Swedish. Hur är det med dig idag? Hur är det med dig idag? And one last time. Hur är det med dig idag? This means, how are you today? The word eder meant you in a polite or formal form in the Old Swedish. Another example, Old Swedish, and the phrase is Ty det vore av vikt att förstå sammanhanget. Ty det vore av vikt att förstå sammanhanget. And one last time. Ty det vore av vikt att förstå sammanhanget. And modern Swedish. För det är viktigt att förstå sammanhanget. För det är viktigt att förstå sammanhanget. And one last time. För det är viktigt att förstå sammanhanget. Both means because it is important to understand the context. The word ty and vikt show a formal older style. Another example. The phrase is Jag skall icke gå dit. Jag skall icke gå dit. And one last time. Jag skall icke gå dit. Modern Swedish. Jag ska inte gå dit. Jag ska inte gå dit. And one more time. Jag ska inte gå dit. Both mean I'm not going there. The word skall and the word icke were standard before. Nowadays we say ska instead of skall and inte instead of icke. Alright guys, let's look at some grammar differences. And let's start with verb forms. Old Swedish used verb forms like the word haver, as you heard before, and the word ärer, which means are, and the word haver means in English have. Modern Swedish uses simplified forms like har instead of haver, har, haver. Both means have. And instead of ärer, modern Swedish uses är. Ärer, är. Both means are. Now let's look at negation. Old Swedish used icke. Icke. Modern Swedish uses inte. Inte. Comparison. Icke. Inte. Icke. Inte. Which one do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Now let's look at pronouns. Older forms like eder, ederes, jag haver disappeared completely from the Swedish language. Well, you might come across jag haver sometimes in older books or poetry. Modern Swedish uses words like du, dig, instead of eder and ederes, but both words means you. And jag haver was replaced by jag har, but both basically means I have. Now let's take a look at pronunciation changes. Old Swedish had clearer, more separate vowel sounds and slower rhythm. Modern Swedish is faster, softer and less formal. A tiny note on English loanwords. Modern Swedish has adopted many English loanwords such as internet, sport and telephone. But in Swedish we would pronounce it like internet instead of internet. Internet. Sport pronounced like sport. 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 And telephone, telefon. Telephone. Telefon. Old Swedish may look complicated, but you'll recognize more than you expect. Languages change, but the core identity of Swedish is still there. It's time to wrap up this episode for today, guys, but there is so much more that you could talk about when it comes to the old way on how Swedish used to sound back in the days and during the history. But if I'm allowed to add my personal thoughts on this, I find it kind of sad that Swedish language doesn't sound that way anymore, because if you read old literature, old Swedish literature and old Swedish poetry, the old Swedish language has a very nice charm to it, and as a Swede myself, I kind of wish that our language, my mother tongue, I kind of wish that we would go back to that tone a little bit more, as I find it very, very beautiful and charming and more formal than the modern Swedish. But that's my own fault. But anyways, thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. If you enjoyed this episode and want the transcript, vocabulary list and more learning material, you can support me on Patreon. Keep practicing, you're doing a great job, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care, bye bye, hej då!